Hello, and welcome to Unlearning Silence. My name is Danica, and this podcast exists because for a long time, silence was something I learned. Not because I wanted to be quiet, but because it felt safer that way. And I know that my experience doesn't exist in isolation. Just a quick note before we begin. This podcast includes discussions on mental health, trauma, neurodivergence, and other related topics. Please take care while listening, pause, and step away if you need. Look after yourself. Let's begin. I want to start by saying a few things about who I am and who I'm not, because in this space, context matters. Now, I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not here to give advice, to tell you what to do, or suggest what will work for you. What I am is someone living with mental health and other diagnoses, including bipolar disorder, PTSD, ADHD, and a few other things just to spice it up a bit. I'm someone whose life has been shaped by mental health in very real, everyday ways. Mental health isn't a topic I visit. It's something I live inside of. I also have friends, chosen family and relatives who live with their own diagnoses of mental health disorders, neurodivergence, or trauma histories. So a lot of what I carry and what I talk about exists not just in my body, but in relationships I have. This space, I'm hoping, will be a space for lived experience, mine, and eventually other people's. I also want to name something simple and practical. I'm recording, sitting in my spare room on my phone, without fancy equipment or noise-cancelling headphones or microphone. You might hear background sounds, the house settling, life happening around me, probably my pets. But that's okay. But it feels like an important thing to say because this podcast isn't coming from a studio or a polished setup in any way. It's coming from real life, as it is, imperfect and unfiltered. And that feels aligned with the space it's meant to be. There may be parts of this that feel a little scripted, and believe me, I've taken a lot of cuts of this to get it right. But it's never going to be perfect. So here we go. I wanted to do this for a very long time, and I'm just going to say, wow, it's surreal to finally be doing this, to take that leap. And honestly, I think a part of what's taken me so long is that I kept waiting to feel ready, to feel healed enough and articulate enough and calm enough. And I realised I don't think that moment actually comes. Now, what I've noticed lately is both online and in real life is that a lot of mental health content is either clinical or inspirational, and it's always neatly packaged. There's much less content out there about the messy middle, the contradictory feelings, this is still happening and I don't have a tidy lesson for it yet part of mental health. So I'm starting now, not because I've figured it out, but because I haven't, and that's okay. What does the name Unlearning Silence mean though? Now the term for me is very personal. For a long time I learned, consciously or unconsciously, that talking about my reality made me too much, too dramatic, too sensitive, too intense. So I learned to stop vocalizing it. I learned to minimize what I was experiencing, to hide it, to swallow it. And while that sometimes kept me safe in the moment, it added a huge amount of pressure internally. And when that pressure had nowhere to go, it built up and it didn't actually disappear, didn't dissipate. Eventually it came out in ways that felt dramatic and messy and sometimes harmful. Not because I was trying to be, but because I'd held it in for so long. I can only imagine what it was like for other people watching it happen. It was scary enough watching it from my point of view. So silence became a survival skill for me. And unlearning that silence, it's been hard and uncomfortable, and it's still ongoing. I'm very much in the middle of it, not at the end. I do want to do a whole episode on this later when I have some more clarity. But for now, that's what the term unlearning silence holds for me. The slow, imperfect process of letting myself speak honestly without apologizing for existing, but also without oversharing and trauma dumping. This podcast, it exists for people who live with mental health challenges, with diagnoses, without diagnoses, and with people with neurodivergence. But it's also for friends, family members, and partners, anyone who wants to understand what it actually feels like to live inside these experiences, beyond the definitions and the checklists, to actually hear about what it feels like. You don't have to relate to everything I say, and you don't have to agree with it. If something resonates, take it. If something doesn't click with what you're experiencing, what you're feeling, or what you've heard, then you're allowed to leave it behind. What you can expect from unlearning silence is raw vulnerability, but no trauma dumping. Honesty, without trying to shock or sensationalize. Stories from my perspective and eventually from guests. There will be moments where I share factual and statistical information, but I'll always try and translate that to everyday language and connect it to real life. Because what are statistics worth if you can't relate them to real life? Some episodes will be quiet, some might be messy, some might feel a bit unfinished. But that's intentional. Life isn't polished and finished and packaged up. That's the point. I also want to be really clear about boundaries. This podcast is not a replacement for therapy, for medical care, or professional support. I strongly support people seeking whatever form of help feels right and accessible for them, as long as it doesn't harm themselves or others. This space exists to reduce isolation, not to replace support. And I encourage you to listen at your own pace, take breaks, and prioritise your safety and well-being. I welcome your comments, but please be aware that we are building a positive, inclusive community with this podcast. Saying that, I don't know exactly where this podcast will go yet. What I do know is that silence has kept me safe, but it doesn't get to run my life anymore. And if you're still here listening, maybe you're unlearning something too. Or maybe you're just curious. Either way, you're welcome here. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you again soon.